Hello everybody, and welcome back to OMB Reviews. I am the critic who is a cynic, coding well, and today I'll be doing a review of the brand new adaptation of The Little Mermaid from Disney, the live action, or I would like to say the quote-unquote live action remake of the original cartoon from the 1990s. And let's just say right off the bat, I think that this movie could have and should have been a lot worse than it actually was. So a small compliment there, but let's just say there are definitely some issues with the film as well. I'll start off talking about some of the positives and then talk about the many negatives that are a part of the overall story and the overall filming of this and the production of this film. Before we go further, though, please make sure to smash that like button, that fire button if you're watching over on Odyssey, and smash the remember button as well. And also make sure that you are subscribed to the channel with the bell notification on. That way you never take a video or live stream goes live on the channel. So the $250 million budgeted movie, The Little Mermaid. And yes, that $250 million can absolutely be seen on screen, because even though this is a quote-unquote live-action remake, the vast majority of this film, it is clearly done with green screen, blue screen, CGI effects. You know, we obviously saw that from the actual trailer, whether it was the design of Sebastian, the design of Flounder, or any of the other characters. The vast majority of them and the backgrounds, especially when they are in the sea for the vast majority of the movie, is just all CGI. And I will say that the CGI definitely has a clean, crisp look to it at certain instances, especially with some of the background imagery and whenever they show kind of close-ups of the human characters, the human actors, right, played by Halle Bailey, also by Javier Bardem's character. And overall, those looked pretty clean. However, there's also way too much of it. There are certain sequences in this movie where you think to yourself, okay, this is a 2-hour and 15-minute movie, and it did not need to be, right? We go back to the original film, which was about 90 minutes or less, and was able to tell the same story. In fact, I think just a better, more crisp story. And this one instead takes a lot longer to tell the story, and in the process also adds in a bunch of scenes and adds in chase sequences and adds in all these other things that just really aren't necessary. I say all that to mention, though, that one of the positives of the film, actually, I would say, is some of those CG elements are not nearly as bad as what they were in the trailer. Did not look nearly as bad as they were in the trailer, in the actual moment themselves, right? The actual element itself, the actual effect itself was still the same. The character designs are still the same, and we'll talk about those in a little bit. But as far as like general CGI, it actually was not nearly as bad as it could have been, right? Based off of the images that we were actually seeing from the trailer. But that's kind of like a half credits and also a half dig at the actual movie itself. As far as just the general positives, I know I was going to start off with the big positives of the movie. First off, I think the score is pretty good. By score, I just mean the actual music. Most of the music in the background is just very powerful. Obviously, this is coming from Alan Menken, who worked on the music from the original movie, and also has done a ton of work with Disney as well. So I think that in general, the score was pretty well done. I think that especially when it comes to the original songs being played in this movie, they were also very good in general. And again, I say in general because there's definitely some things that I will call out when I start to talk about some of the negatives with this movie. So the score, for the most part, is actually pretty good. Also, I want to give a kudos to Halle Bailey. I think that actually she really does, performance-wise, fit a lot of the mannerisms and a lot of the personality traits that the character of Ariel is supposed to have, right? A young, naive girl who has dreams and aspirations of leaving the sea. I think that she was actually able to capture that innocent spirit, even though she's definitely not the most talented actor in this movie, and I think that ultimately she still has a long way to go as far as her acting chops and her acting capacity as well. For this role, I feel you don't really need to have that same level of acting, that same capacity for a performance that, for instance, the woman who did this role on Broadway, Sierra Burgess, she was able to capture it just so much more emotion and able to capture so much more nuance to the performance. And it almost made me wish, like, oh man, imagine if they were able to somehow have told the story with her instead of with Halle Bailey's character. But again, I digress. The fact, though, is Halle Bailey is definitely not the worst performer in this movie, and ultimately does a pretty good job, is able to, again, capture that spirit. And again, part of what makes that work is that she, as an actress, is definitely more on the green side of things, and I think that still is actually able to help with this specific character. The voice work is also where there's a mixed bag. I think that Jacob Tremblay did a pretty good job of doing the voice of Flounder. I think that voice fit the character of Flounder very, very well, so kudos to that. And then there are moments when Daveed Diggs who does the voice of Sebastian, where again, especially when it comes to the people who are in my specific screen, it actually got a lot of laughs, right? There were certain lines that he said that some of the women, younger girls who were in the audience at the screen, it wasn't a very packed screen, but they were in there. They were laughing at almost every single thing that he said. So clearly it is able to garner that kind of reaction and that kind of attention. Didn't really have the same impact on me, but I will give kudos to the fact that it has, and I can clearly state that it does have that impact probably for a lot of people that will end up actually going to see this movie. That's really where the positives of this movie have to actually stop, because there are just so many elements of this that I think don't work. So I could say nice things about Melissa McCarthy's performance. I think that the voice that she puts on for this character of Ursula works very well, but then you actually go to the images, and I don't know, it looks so bizarre and so weird, right? You're looking at just like this natural skin tone of Halle Bailey or Javier Bardem or some of the sisters, right, that are in the movie. And then you go to Ursula. And obviously, this is why this movie should never have been adapted into live action. There's a reason, I think, why when they were first telling this story, when Disney was first telling this story in the 1990s, it was very clearly going to always be an animated story, because if you're dealing with talking creatures, when you're dealing with these fantastical fantasy elements, having it be animated just makes a lot more sense. There's a lot more things you can do with that format. There's a lot more things you can do with that medium that you can't do with live action. And obviously they're trying to say, hey, look, we have this CGI technology now, and so we can do these things live action and we can make them work. And I'm here to say, no, you really can't, right? Even if the CGI, right, the actual effect itself does not look as terrible as it could be, right? Does not look as terrible as some of the bad CGI that we've seen in more recent Marvel films. That doesn't mean that it works, right? So, because something can actually be objectively like, oh, okay, this is actually very well formed. I think of Avatar in this way, right? There's certain things that are really good as far as how the characters are designed, or how the world itself is designed, more so with the world than with the characters when it comes to Avatar specifically. But it still also doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to work, that it's going to coalesce with itself. Now, obviously, the effects here are not anywhere near the level of where they are with Avatar, but the budgets of those two movies, I think, are so far separated that it makes a lot of sense as to why that is the case. But it still also does not really work for this movie. And one of the ways that we really see that, I think, is the way that they present Ursula, right? Ursula works as an animated character, but when you instead have a very human-looking, right, face of Melissa McCarthy, and the only effects that you've added to it are just makeup, it just doesn't look very good. I think there's been some comments about how her character was based off of drag or something to that effect. Well, guess what? It looks that way, which means it just looks that out of water, all puns intended, and it just really doesn't work, right? It doesn't visually work for the actual character itself. Speaking of things that don't work, yeah, the designs for Sebastian, just as bad as they were in the trailer. In fact, even worse, because you're seeing a lot more of the character, and you're getting close-ups of the character, and you're like, okay, yeah, this just doesn't work. You're trying to get a more realistic approach to these characters, and I'm sorry, it just does not come across, I think, the way that they were hoping that it was going to come across. I would also have to say the same thing for, for all the other animated characters, the most annoying of which, by the way, is definitely Awkwafina. Awkwafina is so annoying in this movie as Scuttle. And speaking of the music and how some of it doesn't work, there's some new songs in this movie. And what drove me crazy is that they've already adapted this on Broadway. And part of me wonders if it's a question of like the rights, if they just don't have access to it, but there's some really good songs, right? Some newer songs that were not in the movie that were in the Broadway adaptation that they could have put into this movie. And instead they decided to let Lin-Manuel Miranda, who has of course written a lot of more recent Disney movies and the scores and some of the songs, they instead let him take over and change some lyrics to some of the classic songs. Apparently he changed some of the lyrics in A Poor Unfortunate Souls. He changed some of the lyrics also in Part of Your World. It wasn't egregious enough for me to notice it right off the bat, so I was actually surprised to see that it was in there. But then he also wrote a song called Scuttlebutt. This is the one that's made a lot of waves online. This is the one where it's Awkwafina, rapping. So a CGI bird rapping. And it's, again, one of the most annoying things that you'll ever hear. Just the voice of Awkwafina just does not suit, it does not fit very well. They're trying to play it off as comedic, right? They're trying to say, well, it's not supposed to sound good, it's a comedic song, etc. But that would require her to actually be funny, for her voice to be, like, for that to actually be entertaining. And it's not, right? There's a couple of moments in the movie, actually, where there are some entertaining, moments where you're hearing a very nice song and then you hear her go, and I guess, again, some people thought that was funny at times. I just am very annoyed by her, so I didn't find it nearly as funny, but it is there. There's also, again, some of these comedic elements that work and don't work. For instance, in Kiss the Girl, there's a really, I think, great moment, or actually even before then, there's a really great moment where it looks like Eric and Ariel about to kiss, and then all of a sudden it just randomly cuts over to Sebastian, who's like, yeah, I see what you're doing, girl. All right. And you're like, okay, that was a moment I actually chuckled. I was like, okay, that was actually very well thought out. That was actually very well planned. But then every other moment of comedy just feels forced, right? So where I'm hearing these girls laughing in the theater, I'm just sitting there like, really? That's what's going to make you laugh? Okay, well, apparently this is going to appeal to somebody, right? And I think that's kind of like the major takeaway from this movie is that it is going to appeal to certain demographics. It is going to appeal to certain groups. And I think because of that, we're definitely going to see this film resonate. And so I think the box office, especially for this movie, is definitely going to be very interesting to watch because it's already projected to make a decent amount of money here domestically. The big question is it going to be able to hold from week 1 to week 2? Personally, I don't think it is. I don't think that it should. It might, again, be able to appeal to these demographics, but I think ultimately, especially with how it's projected to do internationally, I think there's just going to be a lot of missed opportunities that they're going to have with this movie. And one of the biggest issues that I really have is the changes that they've made to the actual story. I know that some people might get caught up with the fact that they cast Halle Bailey, and obviously it's caused a lot of controversy. But to me, the bigger issue is with just the general story. The way that the original animated film, and again, I know it's not anywhere close to the very dour and very dark original fairy tale of Little Mermaid, but comparing it to the animated film from the 90s, right? That's obviously the spiritual, connection to this movie, is that in the very beginning, you have Ariel save Eric. And at the very end of the film, Eric then saves Ariel, right? There is this balance that's brought to it, right? There is this sense of self-sacrificial love, right? That she has this, again, basically this very empathetic mindset to save someone she doesn't know, but then falls in love, right? Has that love at first sight. But then he falls back in love with her also. And so in the beginning, it's her saving him. And then at the end, it's supposed to be him saving her. In this movie, instead, they decide to flip that around. She saves him both times. And I kid you not, the line that is used in this movie, she's talking to her father after Ursula dies and says, and Eric, he was there. I wish I was making it up, but she essentially says, Eric was there. Eric was present. Oh, okay. No, instead it should be, no, Eric sacrificed himself to save me, to save us, and then that creates this great bond and this great moment between those two characters. But instead, it's all about Ariel, right? It's all about her getting every single thing. And I know some people might say, oh, you're overplaying this, you're overblowing. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Like, that is a problem because that creates this imbalance in the story. It creates this imbalance in their relationship with one another. And it just also just degrades the character, right? It degrades Prince Eric, who's supposed to be this heroic warrior in this way, especially on the sea. They establish, even in this live action version, how much he loves sailing, how much he loves the sea, how much he loves doing these things, how he is able to save everyone on his ship, right? Before he himself gets saved by Ariel at the very end, in the very beginning of the movie. And so that's established. She doesn't know how to actually, drive a boat. She doesn't know how to steer a ship. And yet she's the one who just flounds onto this, as a mermaid, flounds onto this ship and then spins the wheel. Again, not only does it just not make any sense within the story, but it also just does not work for the actual balance itself. And again, that was something that I had a big problem with. I was just like, as soon as that happened, I'm like, wait, I knew that this was going to happen. I knew that this was what was being talked about, but seeing it play out on screen, and then the follow-up line after in the next scene of, oh yeah, Eric was there. He was there. He cared. It's like, come on. Why would Triton at any point have any positive feelings about him if all of it is, oh, he was there, versus him actually saving? Anyway, so I know I might be harping on that point a little bit too much, but it was a really bad element of the story. But overall, the story could have been a lot better, a lot better. The story, I think, was definitely the weakest part of this. Then next would be some of the CGI. Again, it's not as bad as it could be, but it's definitely not good either. And also some of the voice acting choices. Awkwafina, I think, was a terrible choice for that role. And also some of the story elements and the lyric changes by Lin-Manuel Miranda. Again, he's done some decent things, right? He has done decent things and decent work in other films. This is definitely not his best work. The song Scuttlebutt is one of the most annoying things you will ever hear. I don't recommend you watch it or listen to it, but if you want to find out what I mean by it, just go ahead and Google Scuttlebutt song and say, oh, yes, I could see how this would be very annoying. Overall, I would have to give this film a C-. This is definitely a movie that is one of the better adaptations of the live action genre, but that's not saying a whole lot, right? It's basically going back to 2015 when they did the live action Cinderella. In my opinion, that was actually probably the best live action adaptation that they have done. But even that film, as much as I still actually enjoy that film, that was the first date with my wife, actually, was going to see that movie. I still look at that film and say, it was not needed. You didn't really need to do this. And this one's even more so, because when you're doing all the CGI, when you're spending $250 million on a film like this, you have to ask the question of, okay, why are you doing this? Why are you releasing it? Why are you changing certain story elements? Why are you casting certain people, right? There is, of course, the cornucopia of the sisters, right? And the whole mindset is, well, they're supposed to represent all different areas of the world because they are the sisters of the seven seas. And so that's why they would look different. But then you think, yeah, but it's still the daughters of King Triton who is Hispanic. Wait, what's going on here? Why are they all different? Oh, this doesn't make any sense whatsoever. There clearly is this agenda being pushed in that overall casting. But I can at the very least say when it comes to the casting of Halle, again, I'm probably messing this up, Halle Bailey, I can say at the very least, when she probably gave her audition, even though in their minds I could see that they were having a very specific political agenda, that she at least was able to act the part. She was able to fit that part of Ariel as far as her performance is concerned. And that is definitely something I think that a lot of people may not be saying in the same YouTube space that we are in. But I will have to at the very least be honest about that and say, looking at her performance objectively, she fits Ariel. I think that she was able to fit that persona, despite the fact that there are clear agenda items throughout the rest of the film. But those are my thoughts. I know this was a longer review, but I think that this is the kind of movie that kind of needs to be unpacked a little bit. But ultimately, still continues to be another one of these live action remakes, and I just want them to be done with it. I want them to be finished with it, and that's why I hope the film loses money. And again, it's not because the film itself is the worst thing that Disney's ever done, because believe me, there's been plenty of other things. Artemis Fowl, anybody? If you want to talk about really bad Disney movies, that is a terrible, terrible movie. But these films, again, they're not anywhere close to the originals. They don't add anything to the originals, and they just prove to be a waste of time and a waste of money. But those are my thoughts. What are y'all's thoughts about the movie? Have you seen The Little Mermaid, new live action, quote unquote, live action adaptation? And if so, what are your general thoughts? I know a lot of you watching this from the channel probably don't have any plans to go watch this. I blame Gary from Friday Night Sites for having us watch this, even though apparently some people aren't going to do their homework, and I'm very upset by that. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section down below. If this video, smash that like button, like the fire button, I see you smash the rumble button. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless. And now for a huge special shout out to all of my patrons at the Keeper of the Bifrost level and above, starting off with my patrons over on Patreon: Father Luca Illick, Hymir Irie Hymason, Garrett Searles, Joe Horn, Jonathan Carney, Orange Chat Reviews, who you can check out over at his YouTube channel, Orange Chat Reviews, Laura, the Modern Major General Story, Rosetta Allen, who you can check out at her YouTube channel of Eagle Rider, and Miss Modern Muses, who you can check out at her YouTube channel by the same name as well. Also to my Subscribe Star peeps, Matt317, check him out over on Twitch, Fast Reaction, The R, Mr. Roy, J-Rod, The Beer Guru, and ZK-Man, you can check out over at xtheboundaries.co. And lastly, to my local supporters, Miss Minnesota Hockey Fan, How About a Hockey Player, J.H. Schwalbach, and Robert Barnes, the amazing lawyer. Thank y'all very much for supporting me at that Keep It the Bifrost level and above. And if you want your name shout out at the end of every video and live stream, make sure to check out the top link in the video description in order to get access to that. Also, there's a level where you get access to an exclusive podcast that I do with my friend John the Flip Pig Flickinger, and also to a giveaways channel on my Discord where you get access to the giveaways of various 4K titles, including right now I've got a 4K Steelbook for Training Day. I got the Seventh Seal from Criterion, Plane Trains Automobiles, Kubo and the Two Strings, They Live, Train to Busan, tons of others every single week, every single week. I'm going to stick by that. We're doing this live. I just recently gave away the 3 Steelbook collection for John Wick franchise, the amazing Stash Book Collection version. So if you want to have access to various things like that, hey, check out that top link in the video description below. You're all amazing and beautiful people. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. And as always, God bless.